Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. The Panama Papers have cast a long shadow over the upcoming G7 summit in Japan, where tax evasion, corruption and transparency will be important issues. Earlier this month, the UK hosted a major anti-corruption conference. NGOs welcomed the measures proposed in London, but said that they didn't go after tax havens aggressively enough. So what can be done next to untangle this highly complex global problem of corruption? To try to find some answers, let me introduce my panelists. First, Nicola Bonucci, who is head of legal affairs for the OECD. Welcome to you.
Welcome. Good morning.
Jacques Terret is Vice President of Transparency France, which is, of course, the French chapter of Transparency International. Welcome to you.
Okay.
And we also have Helmut Wirwig, who is a journalist with the Tageblatt in Luxembourg. Welcome to you.
Welcome.
Luxembourg, of course, a country that's been under scrutiny over its tax arrangements in the light of the LuxLeaks whistleblowers issue. I want to start with the summit in London. And Nicola Bonucci, you were there for the OECD.
Yes.
Did you feel that there was real progress made?
Well, the very fact that the summit was called by PM Cameron is by itself a good news. This is the first time that a PM of a G7 country called for an anti-corruption summit. And I think we should not forget that. 20 years ago, bribery was not in the radar screen of most of the international community. In fact, it was something that was a forbidden word in the World Bank. So we should never forget what has happened in the last 20 years. Now, the summit itself has delivered some very good and concrete commitments. A lot of people have focused on the global communiqué, but one has to look at the national commitments that have been undertaken by at least 20 or 25 countries attending the summit. And if you put all those national commitments together, you have pretty strong measures. Now, naturally, as we say, the proof is in the pudding and in the implementation of such commitments.
Jacques Terret, you've been following these issues for many years as well. Has the pudding still not been eaten, so to speak?
Well, I agree totally with what Nicola Bonucci just said about the summit of London. And I would add one thing, which is that OECD has been given a very tough task to implement what has been promised by that summit.
Have you seen that kind of implementation in the past, though?
We have seen, this is what makes me doubt a little bit about the will of governments, including the major ones. When it's a big conference, it's okay. Now, when it comes to implementation, it's very much slower.
Helmut Wirwig, what's your take on the summit?
No, of course not. The pudding hasn't been eaten, you know. As first, Cameron needed to have the summit as having been involved in the Panama Papers. And second, even in Great Britain, you have a lot of territories which are not under the sovereignty of the British government and which do not play the game. In France, for example, you had just the announcement of some new rules and of a new law. And it's not sure at all that these announcements by Mr. Sapin will be realized. So I'm not so convinced. You know, you had a lot of announcements, but you have a lot of announcements since 2010. Since 2012.
That's a key point, isn't it? I mean, for example, these British overseas territories are not going to be required to take part in the new scheme that David Cameron announced.
No, that's not entirely correct. One of the deliverables of the summit is for the OTs and DCs, the crown dependents in an overseas territory. They will have to share information on tax deposit and taxpayer with the UK tax administration. And the UK tax administration will in turn be able to exchange information with other tax administrations. So it's not entirely true that nothing has been achieved. At the end of the day, you know, it's always like that. You can look at it as the glass half full or half empty. I'm an optimistic.
But I mean, this tax exchange that's existed between many countries in the
Yes,
past,
of course.
and it doesn't stop the problem, does it?
No, no. You have millions of datas, perhaps trillions of datas. When you exchange datas inside the Eurozone, only inside the Eurozone, you have trillions of datas. And who will really control these datas and take them out and judge what is important and what is not important about it? You know, we had occasions in the past where we discovered some things which had been known by exchange of data. So the more you exchange data, the more you have problems to understand them and to see them.
Is the problem then a lack of a sort of a supranational tax authority? Is that what's needed, perhaps?
A supranational authority, maybe in the 22nd century, I think. But today, what we have to do is, I'm not sure I'm with my Luxembourg colleague. I think the more we make data public, the better we are. And because when it is public, then civil society comes in, you know, and people like Antoine Deltour come in as well, and the journalists, so that something which was secret in Luxembourg becomes open to the public.
But, you know, just, I know that we are going to discuss
course,
about
yeah.
Luxembourg, but just on this question of tax havens, I think it would certainly not be intellectually honest to say that the issue has been solved. But at the same time, what has happened in the last few years is amazing. Those territories were not sharing any information. They are now sharing information upon request, and they will soon automatically share information. Share information automatically by 2018. As of today, as I speak, through voluntary disclosure, i.e., taxpayers who believe that they will be caught by their tax administration because of those new rules, OECD members and others have recovered already 50 billions of undeclared tax. Those are hard data. This is hard data, 50 billions, which gives an indication of the magnitude of the tax which is not paid. So to say that we still have a lot to do in tax havens and vis-a-vis tax haven, it's true, but to say that basically nothing has happened, I don't think it's fair.
I take your point. You have recovered a lot of tax revenues. I want to get back to the point before, Helmut, you were shaking your head about civil society stepping in.
Yeah.
Why? We're talking about...
I want to tell you something. You told us that something which is not known in Luxembourg or perhaps hidden in Luxembourg becomes public, you know? This is a point of view I can share, as I'm going out from the point of view saying that many things we do not know are legal. They are legal, and we have to see that many things which has become known now are legal. Even the Panama Papers are, as a principle, legal. You know, what was not legal was LuxLeaks. There, two data thieves published something which had to be kept inside the company. It was legal and there was no need to publish it. You know that I think 22 or 25 countries, you might know it better than me, in the European Union are making tax ruling contracts, you know? And why? In a certain moment, it comes over from Luxembourg. You don't speak about Great Britain. You don't speak about the Netherlands. You don't speak about France. And you know what we heard in the process in Luxembourg was that even in Great Britain, in France, and in the Netherlands, you have as many tax ruling acts as in Luxembourg. But nobody speaks about it. You got them only as you had two data thieves who published them. And you had a journalist who made a great ethical fault by making public his source. And this, you know, a journalist never makes public his source. All three are in a court at Luxembourg.
I think, if I may, that we are mixing different issues.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. First, tax ruling. Yes, again, tax ruling was a practice, but the world is changing, and the world has changed. You know, I'm sorry to say, but practices evolved. The societies evolved. Slavery was part of the day-to-day business. I'm not comparing tax ruling as slavery, but this was part of the day-to-day business economically in the 17th and 18th century. That's over. All those practices are now will now gradually be eliminated because and actually what is shocking in the tax ruling, and not necessarily in Luxembourg only, and I fully agree with you, is the fact that they are secret. What is important is
they are secret in Great Britain too.
Yeah,
in France too.
And I as I said, not only in Luxembourg.
Secret.
So tax no, less and less so. You have a number of countries which now have asset disclosure rules. Now, on the question of tax rulings are not necessarily negative, but they need to be transparent so that the taxpayers can decide if the tax ruling is fair or not fair. On whistleblower protection, or whistleblower legislation, that's another issue. And one of the difficulties is indeed, I think, that we need to understand what we are talking about. I'm not entering into a discussion about an ongoing trial. So this is the sovereignty of a country. But in general, again, not talking necessarily about this particular case, one of the great sources of disclosures of tax evasion, transnational bribery, money laundering is whistleblowing. We all know that from internal sources. And whistleblower protection has to be ensured. And this is something on which even OECD member countries have a lot to do more.
Jacques Terray, I'd like you to get your reaction on what Helmut Wirwich was saying earlier about these are two data thieves, simply. How do you see it?
On whistleblower protection, I think that, as Nicola Bonucci just said, most of the tax scandals have been found out by whistleblowers. And whether the LuxLeaks, for example, were disclosing something legal or illegal, I don't know. But what I can see is that following the LuxLeaks, the European Union has started investing much thought about making public what the tax rulings are. And so long as it's made public, it's okay. It's okay. It gives all the countries of Europe the possibility of seeing who is cheating against European Union principles and who is abiding by those principles. And clearly, what happened in Luxembourg, and which is what happens in other countries as well, is cheating the Union.
No, not at all. I don't agree with you when you include the notions fair and unfair. I think we should take them out.
I mean, something can be legal. Something can be legal, but it is for the public opinion, and the public opinion has the right to have its own opinion on the fairness or unfairness of the system.
I don't think that OECD should work with those notions.
The OECD has been working on tax optimization through BEPS. The fact that
judging
nobody is questioning that the practices of the companies that have been used in the last 20 years are illegal. Nobody has said that. The reality, though, is that even if they are not illegal, is it normal that a company like General Electric hasn't paid taxes in the US for the last 6 years? Is it normal that a company like Total has not paid taxes in France for a few years? Is it normal that a company like Google pays 3% overall worldwide taxes? Nobody is questioning the legality. All those measures, all those practices are legal. The question is, in a post-financial crisis, and we are not really in a post-financial crisis because a lot of people are still suffering, is it something acceptable? we don't believe, and when I say we, it's not the OECD, the G20 countries, by launching the BEPS project, do not believe that this is fair.
Well, LuxLeaks didn't change anything, in contrary to what OECD says. It didn't change anything. The first to ask an exchange of tax ruling acts to Luxembourg had been the Belgians. And nowadays, all countries practicing tax ruling acts are exchanging their tax ruling acts.
Yes,
So you continue to have it. Might be that in 20 years you will not have them any longer, but not to have them any longer means to give up sovereignty in tax questions.
But tax rulings are fine if they're public.
Yes, of course. Once more you judge them. Once more you judge them, and this is not your role as OECD to judge them.
Essentially, we're running out of time. Just a final comment from you, Jacques. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about this exchange of information actually leading to any fundamental
I'm
change?
optimistic, provided the rules are made much stricter from now on. And this is the work of OECD, this is the work of civil society, and this is the work of governments, even the Luxembourg government, which has changed its position since the LuxLeaks happened.
Indeed, it's changed its bank secrecy arrangements from 2017. We'll have to end it there. I'm so sorry because we've run out of time. We've come to the end of part one of the show, but we'll be looking at these issues of corruption and transparency in part two, and specifically what the European Parliament is doing about it with our MEP guest,